Okay, it's 12 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Brooke Charlotte, and with me today is Julie Jones, who teaches here at Ursuline College. Over the next 30 minutes, Julie will be sharing with us her insights on mental performance and the impact it brings to sports and every aspect of our lives. Julie, take it away.
Thanks, Brooke. Welcome, everyone. We're really glad that you're here today. And just so we are clear, the pretense of this whole webinar is to introduce our program to coaches that we have here at Ursuline College. But the content of it will be things that you can take back to your program today and maybe get you thinking about how important mental training is and all those different things. But we are hosting micro-credentials and mental performance. And I'm teaching 3 classes related to these things: understanding and coaching sustainable behavioral change, which for coaches is so important, as we all know, well-being, and how that makes a difference in performance and all those different aspects that we deal with on the field, on the court, on the pitch, whatever it might be, on the course. And then a course on mindset training, how to build a program or how to go out and teach others how to build programs about mindset training. So just this is a part of our Masters of Wellness, or it can be a micro-credential. Just wanted to run that out there, throw that out there right off the top. And now we'll get into the mental training portion of this webinar. I just want to give you a quick rundown for those of you that I have not had the pleasure of being on a webinar with in the past. My name is Julie Jones. I spent 26 years coaching at the Division I level in softball. I was at the University of Akron and at Cleveland State University, both for 13 years each, ironically. But during that time, when I was at Cleveland State, at least, I was 26 when I became a head coach. And a couple years after that, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And we had an amazing sports psychologist at Cleveland State, Dr. Sue Ziegler. During the time that I was diagnosed, I used her myself for mental training. I would go to her office 3 days a week, lay on the floor. She would run me through visualization. I would fight the cancer out of my body. And of course, I don't have any true research data that proves that this made a difference in my recovery or my prognosis or anything that happened after that. But I am standing here almost 20 years later, fully healthy. And I do know that there's anecdotal evidence for sure. And there is research that states that what our mind does to our bodies makes a huge difference. Since leaving coaching, I've been here at Ursuline College. I also own a mental performance business where I work with teams and athletes all over the country, called SSB Performance, and that's the orange and blue logo that you see on your screen. So this is not only something I use as a coach, sometimes not often enough, as you'll see in just a second, but I also have used this personally and fully believe that how we deal with the mental aspect of the game can change the way our athletes perform. So we're going to talk about how that goes. This is Yogi Berra. For those of you guys that are bat and ball sports sport enthusiasts like I am, you know that one of the Yogiisms that he said was that baseball is 90% mental and the other half is physical. Well, obviously, we think in mental performance training that all performance, no matter what, golfers, soccer players. I work with a couple soccer teams, and boy, you don't have a lot of time to get over yourself in that game. It's moving fast, but mental performance is about 90% of what we do. Obviously, we have to have the physical talent, we have to have the skill, but this is the one skill that is overlooked often. And my question to you is, how much time do you devote to mental performance training with your athletes or with yourself? I did a little research on what I thought I did, and you figure we had about 500 hours a year to practice. And I wrote down, we used to do drills that would be like, we'd have a hitting rotation and have 7 minutes of visualization or something like that, or we would do post-game things, or we would do off-season stuff. And even then, the things that we did throughout my career, and sometimes a lot, sometimes not enough, I think I devoted about 2% of our time to mental performance training. So if we can up that by even 10%, we'll be helping our athletes. And then we're going to talk about how we can do that a little bit today. But we're never without our mind. And obviously hitters never hit without a helmet, and players never go to the field without their head. So what we do above our shoulders makes such a big difference in what they're doing. They spend all this time getting ready, lifting, nutrition. Even our best athletes who follow exactly what we want them to do get frustrated because of what goes on above their shoulders, right? These barriers get in the way, have unrealistic expectations. I just talked with an athlete who's at the Division III NCAA softball championship. I talked with her this morning, and she thinks she has to strike everybody out. Well, that's a mental barrier that's going to affect her performance. You know, they lose focus, they become unhappy, they have all these expectations that are not realistic. You know, they're afraid to fail. Oh my gosh, they don't know how to compete, they overthink. All these things get in the way, and all of them lead to decreased performance. They practice better than they play. They're apathetic. They have constant doubt. But all of this runs through our mind. Our mind. It has nothing to do with the muscles in our body. This week I was reading Harvey Dorfman's The Mental ABCs of Pitching, and he said every night our muscles get together and have a beer, and they say, if she'd only trust me. If she'd only trust me, we could do the skill. But our mind gets in the way so much. And a lot of that has to do with where we focus and how we operate. And we know that mental preparation is the differentiator, quite honestly, between a championship mindset and an average mindset, or it may give you the bump up to that next level of competition. You all know this, I'm sure, but mindset training or mental performance training is simply learning what to think or not to think at any given time for peak performance. What do we need to be thinking about prior to acting? When do we not need to be thinking? What is it that we need to be doing to prepare ourselves so that we don't mess up, and so our muscles don't have to get together every night and have a beer and say, if she'd only trust us? What do we need to do? What's our plan for using our brain to direct our actions? In the programs that I work with, and in the program that we teach here at Ursuline, we will cover all of these tools right here, things that you probably have all worked on at some point or another, but talking about mistake rituals and visualization and meditation and gratitude, such a major part of having our kids be healthy and have a high sense of well-being. Journaling, which sounds so foo-foo, but some of this, I tell people all the time, I am the least kumbaya kind of person in the world, but all these things, this meditation, it's not, right? It's training our brain to be able to move non-productive thoughts out and productive thoughts in. And that's what all these tools do. And they're all so beneficial. But first we have to understand and get our athletes to understand their brains. They have to understand when they need a plan, what they need to do to get the outcome they want or that they're striving for, and how our brain holds us back. And the truth is that our brain doesn't like new stuff, even if it's going to make us better. We want to make sure that we are comfortable, right? That's what we want as human beings. We want to be comfortable. And that's our brain telling our body to do whatever it is that makes us comfortable. Take just a second here, and if you can throw it in the chat, I want you to think about how many windows are on the front of your house. Okay, the house that you live in, how many windows are on the front of your house? This is the front of my house. We didn't really have a preschool picture today this year, so this is last year's school picture in front of our house. But think about how many windows are on the front of your house. Count them. We've got a whole bunch. I always forget about a couple of them, but count them. Like, you can picture your house. Right? That is something you pretty much know what your house looks like. Well, the cool thing is that we think in pictures, and we need to use this to our advantage. And I was running on the treadmill about, 6 months ago now, and I was watching a TED Talk, and I jumped off the treadmill to take a picture of this image right here. This is your brain in an fMRI machine. The first column, the column on the left, is a picture of your brain lighting up when you look at a picture. So, or you looking at your house. All right, so if you're standing on the sidewalk and you looked at your house, that's what your brain would look like lit up. This middle column in here is your brain looking at a picture of your house. So this is just an image, right? No, I'm sorry, it's imagining what you're looking at. It's imagining what you're looking at. So if you're looking at a picture or you're looking at your actual house, that's the column on the left. The middle picture, the middle column is you imagining what your house looks like. So what we just did. So if you went home today and looked at your house, you would see your brain would look like the column on the left. What we just did lights your brain up like the column in the middle. The column on the far right is the difference between the two. The researchers thought they would see something show up differently. Nothing showed up differently. So this means that looking at a picture or an object and then imagining the picture or object lights up the same exact part of your brain. It's crazy. So since we think in pictures all the time, we need to use this to our advantage. That's where this visualization comes in and the imagery that we do. That's where we can have kids even look at still photos of themselves and picture themselves working through a skill. Maybe they're in, maybe they're coming up to the tee, or you see their follow through, or you get a picture of them at contact, whether they're, making a shot on the soccer field or shooting the basketball, whatever. We can use pictures to help us. And since we think in pictures and everything that we think sort of brings up an image, we need to be able to control that as well. So I wanted you to just think about that, how amazing our brain is. Our brain is amazing and it's frustrating, both, which we'll see in just a second, but we need to be able to learn to use that to our advantage and not our disadvantage, because our brain can become our disadvantage if we don't direct it the right way. Our brain's number one goal is this: survival. It wants today to look just like yesterday, and it wants tomorrow to look just like today, which is great if we want to survive, right? I woke up this morning, so that's a good thing, but it's not good if we're trying to improve. So we are built for survival, not necessarily improvement. So we've got to figure out how to do that. And those of you that have been with me before have seen this. We've got obviously two sides of the brain. Everybody knows this. We've got the subconscious and the conscious, and we've got to figure out how to get both of these things working to our advantage. When I first started researching and doing some of this, I thought, gosh, we really got to depend on that conscious brain to help get over our emotion and get past things. But that's not true. We've got to have both working in concert, because we can't think too much. Because a lot of times what we're thinking, 74% of the time, what we're thinking on the inside is negative, right? And we can't be without emotion, because if we don't have emotion, we don't do stuff. So we've got to figure out how to use them both. And Jonathan Haidt, who's a professor at NYU, calls this the elephant and the rider. We've got this elephant, and that's the emotional side. And we know we follow that most of the time, 6 tons. We've got the person, that's us, the rider, and we weigh whatever we weigh, not 6 tons. So we've got to be able to, that rider has to be able to drive that elephant, but we can't let the rider do all the thinking and all the work, because we're not going to get anywhere that way either. So we've got to figure out how to deal with both sides of our brain. The elephant provides that autopilot, which sometimes is good. Like, you ever drive somewhere and you get there, you're like, I have no idea which direction I just came. That's sort of scary, but we do it all the time, right? We go on autopilot at least 45% of the time, falling back on our habits. It also helps us engage, and that's where we want to be. The rider can be critical, right? Critical in a positive way and critical in a really bad way. So we've got to stay away from that, but we've got to be able to think. So we've got to figure out how to balance both of these things. And we want our teams to be solution focused. We want them to have a championship mindset and think about what it is that they can do instead of what they can't do. If you use mental training enough, you can start to eliminate excuses. And you can also, if we can get them to understand that choice is choice and choice is their own, and our decisions determine our destiny, we get out of that blame game. Right? We take responsibility and accountability for what it is that we're doing. But back to the brain for a second, we've got to be able to direct the rider. We've got to be able to motivate the elephant. We've got to be able to shape the path. So that means we need to be able to think instead of be critical. And we've got to be engaged over just sort of going through the motions. And that's what's going to help us decide whether we're the victor or the victim if we take control. And this is where we get into the important part of what we're going to talk about: control. Our goal is to control our thoughts so we can control our body and stay away from that sympathetic nervous system that gets us to fight or flight, and stay in that parasympathetic system that helps us remain in control and calm. Now, clearly we need to be aggressive. We need to understand our arousal level. We have to have some semblance of go get 'em when we're competing, but we don't need that when we're delivering a pitch necessarily. We don't need to be all like crazy. Depending on, some kids need to be a little bit more hyped up than others, but we've got to be able to be in control. We don't want to be peeing our pants, right? And that's what the sympathetic nervous system unfortunately can help us do. We want to be able to control our bodies. One way we can start doing this is to stop listening to ourselves and start talking, telling ourselves what we want. I use this with our kids all the time. You do not go into Chipotle and say, I don't want, I don't want, I don't want. You go in there and you say, I want the burrito with extra beans, light on the rice, whatever it is. Because if you don't tell them, if you say, I don't want the tacos, I don't want the whatever, the carnitas or whatever it is, the guy behind the counter is going to go nuts. And the 40 people behind you waiting are going to like jump on your back. But most importantly, they're going to give you garbage. And if we don't tell ourselves what we want, if we keep telling ourselves what we don't want, our minds give us garbage. We focus on what we don't want instead of what we do, and focusing on what we want is critical because our thoughts affect our emotions, which affect our actions, which affect our performance, which ultimately affect our results, our outcomes. With all of the mental performance stuff that I work on, I talk about a bunch of P's, right? Being present, being positive, our posture, process, and then we can add in a couple more, perspective and preparation. All these things are important, and they all make a difference on where our brain is when we need it or when we need to shut it down. But our mind wanders 47% of the time at least. So if we're at 15 minutes during this time, you're not going to be with me, right? And just check in right now, right? For 30 seconds at least at a time. But 40% of the time, our kids are not listening to us. So we've got to make sure we can help them focus. They're amazing time travelers. They're worried about what's going to happen. They're worried about what just happened. It's not a benefit to performance. We also are given this gift of a negativity bias. I can figure out what's wrong with every situation. What a gift, right? That's what coaches do. We're constantly looking for problems. But inside, we're constantly looking for threats. That's why we've got to get out and focus on external things when we're performing and not be worried about what's going on inside. If we get stuck inside, we're going to be listening to those 74% of negative things we're telling ourselves, non-productive thoughts. We've got to get out of that and have a process. That's where the 1P of process comes in. What do I do now? What do I do now? If this happens, what do I do next? This is all normal, but we don't want normal. We're looking for excellence. So how do we get there? It affects our confidence. We're going to wrap back around into the end to how this affects our confidence. But what we have to do is we've got to script the critical moves, have a plan, and it starts with the control of our focus, right? Every day is a new battle of what we're going to focus on. Are we going to say yes to this or no to this, yes to this, no to this? But we have to be in control of ourselves before we can control our performance. We have to be in control of ourselves before we can control our performance. I read the other day, or I heard this the other day, I think it was from Dr. Rob Gilbert, who does the Success Outline. If you ever listen to Brian Kane, he talks about him all the time. But he said, how do you catch a bird if there's a bird in your house? Like, do you swat at him with a broom and you think he's going to land somewhere? Or you see people catching a bird like this, right? Come land on my finger. You're a lot less threatening that way, right? We're never going to get anywhere flailing around. We've got to be able to catch a bird, right? It's very important to have control of ourselves to get where we want to go. We've got to be aware of ourselves in order to do this. And with all the athletes that I work with, we talk about self-awareness being our superpower. If we don't know something exists, we can't change it. So we've got to figure out where our focus is and then how we can control it. But focus is a deliberate decision. A deliberate decision. We get to decide what we focus on every minute of every second of every day. It sounds exhausting, and we don't have to be engaged all the time, obviously, but it's a choice. And we can always change the direction of where our mental beam is or where our focus is. It can get wider, it can get smaller. You can be surveying the field, you can be surveying the ball right in front of you, whatever it might be. But in order to be in control of ourselves, we have to focus on the things that we can control. And this is what I start out with everyone on that we deal with in programs is what can you control? And they give you the three normal things. I can control my effort, my attitude, and my focus. There's so much more that they can control. They can control what time they get up in the morning. They can control what they eat. They can, I mean, the list is exhaustive of the things that they really can control based, if they plan ahead, if they have a plan, right? But the truth of it is, most of the time, or most people spend about 40% of their time focusing on the things that they can control and 60% of the time focusing on things that they can't control. What a waste. Waste of time, effort, and energy. Even if we can flip-flop that, our performance increases immensely. So, and we'll send you a copy of this worksheet, and I'm sure you've all done this before. So you have your student athletes list what they can and can't control. I was at the Cleveland Clinic with my dad the other day, who's having some heart issues, and I started to freak out for a second. And I was sitting in a chair, he was in getting a test, and in my mind, I pictured this worksheet. And I just put in my head, I just put like a line in between my brain. And I said, okay, Julie, what can you control right now? What can't you control right now? And where does your focus need to be? So this is not only something that works for athletes. My stress level went down instantaneously when I realized that I was worried about things I cannot control and things that really don't matter. But we can have our student athletes do this and then take it one step further. We need to go then to what can they influence? And what does influence mean? Influence means, can I give it less importance? Can I act a certain way to maybe influence those around me to hopefully help them get on the right track? Can I ignore it? Can I change my environment? Can I make a different choice so that it doesn't impact me? Can I totally just write it off as if it doesn't exist? How can we influence and have them write that down? Okay, here's my list of uncontrollables. Here's how I can influence them. Influence can be a lot of different things. And on the worksheet, you'll see the explanation that you can share. But how can we influence the things we can't control? That doesn't mean we control them. It means we allow them to affect us less. Or we influence them in one way or another. And then lastly, it's critical that they understand that the things they can control will only be controlled if they have a plan to do so. How can I control my energy? How can I control my attitude? What does that mean? As Dr. Ziegler used to tell us, by doing what? It's great to have an idea, but we have to have a system, a process, a plan on how to do these things, because nothing will get done if we don't have a plan. So what can I control? What can I control? What is influenceable? What is not? Some things are not. Some things just are. They are what they are, and it is what it is. But an umpire's bad call, a referee's bad call, there's nothing we can do to change it. So how do we allow that to affect us less or not at all and consider it part of the game? As my former assistant used to say, it's not their real job, even though this is our real job and it affects our outcomes sometimes, but not really if you add them all up. But so what can I control? What can I influence? And then what do I need to do to control the things that I truly can control? Having a plan makes all the difference. The other thing that we get them to do when we talk about what they can and can't control is stop asking why and start asking what. Why did that happen? Why? That's a victim's mentality. Asking what is a victor's mentality. It implies that you're going to do something. And the only way things will change is if we act. Even if we don't feel like acting, if we act, all of a sudden we feel like acting a lot of times. So instead of why, we ask what. That helps us be in control. That changes us from being worriers, as I was sitting at the Cleveland Clinic the other day, to visualizers, to say, these are the things that I can control. These are the things that might happen, and here's how I'm going to plan for them. Whatever my dad's prognosis is, or whatever, if he has to have the heart pump put in, here's what we're going to do. Here's our plan. Will our plan work 100%? No. But we can adjust at that point. We're focused on positive movement forward. That's important. We have to make a deliberate mindset shift from what we can't control to what we can control, and then do the best we can of doing that to make our performance better. If we can change it from 40-60 to 60-40, it's a win. it's a win for us. Our outcomes will be better because we're focusing on the things that really can move the needle. It all comes down to this. I'm sure you've seen this before. E plus R equals O. We have events, we have things that happen to us. I'm sitting at the clinic from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. on Tuesday or whatever day it was. Wasn't my plan, right? But it was an event. How do I respond to that event? It changes the outcome because our response changes everything that happens after that. We always have a choice on how we respond, and we always have a choice on what we choose to lend our focus to. That's our response ability. The ability to respond is our decision and our choice. And if we can get our athletes to understand that, man, our job's a lot easier. Uncontrollables equal excuses. Excuses aren't good for much, as we know. Those that make excuses don't do much else. And we get to choose control. What's helpful to my performance? If I focus on the umpire's call, the referee's call, or the lay of the ball, is that going to be positive for my performance? If it's not, then we make a mental shift and we bring in a positive thought, whatever that might be. Keeping my head down, having a system of what my ABCs of performance are, whatever that might be. But the bottom line is this: training and practice give us the power to switch from one non-productive thought, right? We're scripting the critical moves, to a productive thought. And productive thoughts and positive emotion are directly correlated with peak performance. Negative people don't succeed nearly as far or as long as positive thinking people. Easier said than done, but true. When we lose control, we encourage our athletes to refocus, to breathe. That's a whole nother workshop, the importance of breathing, and then to execute our plan. But we don't have a plan if we don't take the time to write a plan. And that's why this controllable worksheet can be very helpful. We need to choose to focus on what we can control, choose to focus on how we can help the team, and then choose our attitude. And confidence, like we mentioned at the beginning of this, begins with accountability and responsibility. And we can gain confidence by taking control. Everyone knows we feel better when we're in control. I feel better when the inside of my car is clean. I feel like I'm in control then. That's weird, but that's just me. I feel better when my house is neat because I feel like I have control over that. And maybe that's just because coaches have so little control in the end that those are the things that we take control of. But confidence increases when our feelings of control increase. I've said this time and time again, but life is not a talent game. You know this by looking at your athletes. Sometimes the most talented person is not the most successful. It's a strategy game. And that's why helping our athletes build plans, helping our athletes and helping our programs move forward with mental performance training is so critically important. So at this point, we're close to this. If anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. But I do want to just throw this out there. If you're not already on my weekly mailing, if you go to ssbperformance.com/subscribe, you can subscribe to my Monday Mindset Made Simple tips. I won't blow your inbox up. I promise. I send one email a week that talks about tips like this, things about control, things about perspective, anything that has to do with performance. So if you're interested in that, please go to SSB Performance and check that out. And then lastly, if you are interested in more information on joining me in our programs that we have here at Ursuline, please visit our website. You can see them here. So at the Institute for Women, Wellness and Work, and this is not just for women, it just runs through that institute because we're a women's focused college. You can apply or get more information at the websites that are here. The classes could start in the summer. We're running them throughout the year. But then if you're interested in tying a micro-credential into a master's degree, you can also look at information on our Masters in Wellness on our website. So if anybody has any comments, please, you can feel free to unmute yourself and throw it out there. I know if you're on a tight time schedule, feel free to jump off. But if anybody wants to chat after this, I'm happy to stay on, answer questions, or if anybody has any comments, throw them in the chat, and we can have a conversation if you're interested in. Otherwise, if you're again, go to my website if you want more information there. Check these websites out. If I can be of help to you with your programs, please reach out. I love this stuff. If I was smarter as a coach, I would have used it more consistently, particularly in my time at Akron after leaving Cleveland State and losing Dr. Sue Ziegler, but it makes a big difference. There's no question about it. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Julie, one quick question that's in the chat. I think that the coaches on here can probably all agree that this is a great tool to use when coaching the students. But one person is asking, how do you get buy-in from the players?
Well, that's a great question. The first thing that, particularly when I'm working with younger athletes or maybe freshmen, the first thing that I do with those programs is I ask them to go out and do research on who uses mental performance training in professional sports. And I just did this last week with a high-level soccer team here in Ohio, and they brought back Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, Simone, and I can't think of her last name, the gymnast, all these major athletes. And it started there, like, oh my gosh, people actually do use visualization, and these people meditate. Wow, I would never even thought of that. Grown men, these big, huge men that, young girls would never think would ever sit down and do a breathing exercise. They're now reading about them, right? Clayton Kershaw uses shadow bullpens all the time. There's a ton of Serena Williams, who I used, I think, in one of my examples here. That's where I start with it. And then again, like I used to tell our people all the time, or our kids in my program, 40% of the people are going to take it. 40% of the people will be okay with it. And 20% of the people aren't going to do anything with it. But if you can get 80% of your kids, if you can work on that 40% in the middle, if you can get 80% of your kids to use one tool, that's a win. And the other thing is trying to figure out what works for each kid. And that takes a lot of time sometimes, but giving them a lot of options, because everything's not going to fit for everyone. Everything's not going to fit for everyone. So that's where really diving into this and learning more about mental performance and the tools can be helpful, because then you can share a lot of options and somebody will find something.
Great. And Julie, can you go back to the slide for your newsletter? I've got a couple people that are interested in the link for your newsletter.
There we go. ssbperformance.com/subscribe. My friend Dan Gerlach, who I'm looking at on the phone right now. I see you there, Dan. He's on there. He subscribes. Yeah, thank you. Anything else in the chat there? What's that, Dan?
It is worth it. So anybody that's not on it, make sure you do and you get on it, and it just reminds you to continue to do it. So, and Julie spent time with our kids. They made a difference. So it's just not coming from me. So.
Thanks, Dan. I'll pay you later.
I was in admissions office. That's why I was late. So.
Yeah. You coaches are busy. I know. Appreciate it. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you all joining us today. And again, reach out with any questions. Julie J at ssbperformance.com or julie.jones@ursuline.edu. Either one, I'll get you information on Ursuline on Ursuline program. And we really appreciate your time. Brooke, is there anything else that we?
Following this, we'll go ahead and send you the information, and I'll also make sure that we include that worksheet that Julie was talking about. And we'll be sure to also include the links to subscribe to Julie's newsletter, as well as her contact information if you want to talk to her more.
Oh, one question came in. What time would you spend on mental training week? I think you can do about 10 minutes a day, if that. And that could be wrapped into practice. That could be something they do on their own. There are things they can do outside of practice that take about 5 minutes. This doesn't need to be a huge, this doesn't have to be a huge commitment time-wise. And I think that's why people shy away from it so much. But if you have a set program that you touch on something every day, and it could be something different every day, whether it's mental reps, whether it's shadow bullpens, whether it's a gratitude journal, but all these different things could be fit in very, very easily. And then Oh, thank you, Craig. I had a spelling error on my presentation and I looked, but I can't see my own. I can see everybody else's mistakes, but my own. See, I need to do a little more self-awareness here, but thanks, Craig. But social media handles at SSB Mindset, and then on Facebook, just SSB Performance, same thing on Instagram, our social media handles. So thanks, everyone. I think Sue asked a question, I think, about
Emotional effects.
emotional effects. Your thought on overcoming years of a kid overcoming negative input from parents. Thoughts on negative input from parents. That's a tough one. I'm working with a basketball player who was a figure skater, and figure skaters are constantly sort of, you know, like they take stuff off, right? They are demerits. So you start with 10 and then all of a sudden you don't have 10 anymore or whatever it is. So that's been a really, really hard thing for her to overcome. She thinks that people are constantly criticizing everything she does. You know, everything's on stage. And the one thing that they need to first realize is that people aren't thinking about them nearly as much as they think we are. Like my dad told me that years ago. He's like, Julie, people are not worried about you. They're too worried about themselves. That's the best advice I think he ever gave me. But overcoming negative input from parents is very difficult. Training them to look for the bright spots in things, anything, becomes a habit. And a gratitude journal can be very helpful with that. And Sue, if you want to talk about that at some point, just shoot me an email. So thank you everyone for being with us. We really, really appreciate it. Anything else here? Let's see. When I was at University of Winnipeg. Yeah. Oh, look at that. They were 101 and 2 over 3 years when they had a sports psychologist working with them. Nice. Nice. All right. Reach out if you have any other questions. We appreciate it. I'm happy to share information on our program. It's a great program and we're really excited about it. We'd love to have some of you involved. Thanks so much for your time today, everybody.
Julie.